Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 648 for July 2nd, 2017. Coming up in a few minutes.
He always drunk Johnny Walker Black. That was his favourite tipple at the time, but he never got it served correctly. So whenever he'd go into a bar, he'd say, well, can I get it in a wine glass, Paris goblet or something, because at least he'll appreciate it more.
Raymond Davidson's prototype whiskey glass eventually made it off the shelf, and that's a good thing. Glencairn Crystal sold more than 3 million of them last year. Raymond's son Scott runs the company now, and he'll join us later on WhiskyCast In-Depth to add some clarity to the family's story. You might say he'll make it crystal clear. I'll also have the calendar of events, this week's Your Voice, the What I'm Tasting This Week department, and no more puns. All coming up on this week's WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
You don't need a special occasion to celebrate with something truly unique. But a personally engraved bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label can make any occasion special. Support for WhiskyCast comes from Johnnie Walker. Visit johnniewalker.com to find out more about engraving options near you.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by Highland Park. Ireland's Teeling Whiskey Company is back in the headlines again. 2 weeks after announcing plans to expand its distillery in Dublin, the Teeling brothers have sold a minority stake in the company to Bacardi. That's just a small part of the deal, which will see Bacardi take over distribution of Teeling's whiskeys in the United States starting in September. Until now, Teeling had been working with Infinium Spirits, which brought Teeling's whiskeys to the U.S. 3 years ago. The move will bring Teeling into Bacardi's extensive U.S. distribution network in partnership with Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. That's one of the country's largest distributors, and it's expected to give Teeling whiskeys a nationwide reach. Jack Teeling founded the company after leaving Cooley Whiskey following its acquisition by Beam at the end of 2011. His brother Stephen joined the company shortly after that. Their father, John Teeling, founded Cooley back in 1989. Jack and Stephen Teeling will continue to run the company out of Dublin. Both Teelings were unavailable for interviews after the announcement. Sweden's Box Distillery held its annual Open Day and Festival Saturday on the High Coast, and there's plenty to celebrate this year. Box's directors have signed off on a major expansion project that will triple production capacity to 300,000 liters of alcohol each year, with 2 additional stills and 4 new washbacks, along with a new maturation warehouse. Managing Director Thomas Larson told me they'll have to wait in line at Forsyth's in Scotland before they can complete the project, though.
We have decided to do that and starting the building in a year about, because the stills we can't get here from Scotland, and it will take at least 12 months to get them here. So after that, we will put them in the distillery, and hopefully we started to run the new production in late autumn in 2018.
You're basically selling everything you make now, right?
Yeah. Why we do this increase the production is that we don't have enough what the market are looking for from the whiskey from box. So therefore we have decided to increase our production. And we are very, very happy and lucky about that. I think everyone who's working in the company sees that we are doing very, very well, and the market are looking for whiskey from box.
In the meantime, construction begins next month on an expansion to Box's visitor and conference center. The distillery has become a popular site in the area for business meetings and conferences, as well as distillery tours. That expansion will be completed in November, in time for the holidays. Let's update a story we first brought you back in January of 2016. during episode 574 of WhiskyCast. Back then, we reported on a Scottish government grant for the Drimnin Distillery Company near Oban on Scotland's northwest coast. At the time, founder Annabelle Thomas told us that it would complete the funding that her family needed to build the distillery. Well, it did. ScotchWhiskey.com reports what's now known as the Nooknean Distillery started laying down spirit in March and will open to visitors this month for pre-booked tours. Thomas renamed the distillery after a witch in Scots Gaelic folklore who was thought of as the Queen of the Spirits. Dr. Jim Swan helped design the distillery and was its lead consultant. Sadly, he passed away in March just before they filled the first barrel of new make spirit. And the Baltimore Whiskey Company is on the move, literally. It'll be moving the entire distillery to the new Union Collective project in Baltimore's Hampton-Medfield neighborhood in early 2018 from its original location. The move will allow for a second still and more fermenters, and the move comes as the distillery will release its first rye whiskey that's currently being matured. In other news this week, Beam Suntory has named a new master blender for its Scotch whiskey portfolio. Longtime Beam blender Ron Welsh will be responsible now for the company's entire portfolio of blends and single malts, and he'll also handle new product development for Beam Suntory's Irish whiskies. Welsh takes over following Rachel Berry's move to Ben Riach earlier this year. He was the lead blender for Beam in Scotland before it was acquired by Suntory in 2014, while Berry was the master blender for Suntory's Morrison Bowmore Distillers unit in Scotland. One other note from Beam Suntory, veteran global brand ambassador Gordon Dundas announced his departure from the company this weekend. He had been with Morrison Bowmore and Beam Suntory for the last 6 years. No word on his future plans, but we wish him the best of luck. Meanwhile, the final edition of 1964 Black Bowmore has finally made it to the U.S. A single cask of 50-year-old whiskey that produced 159 bottles went on the market globally at the end of last year. The whiskey came from 2 original 1964 casks that were losing liquid to the Angels and were married into a single cask back in 2002. That cask was overlooked when the 2007 release of Black Bowmore was bottled, and it turned up during an inventory check in 2014. It's been bottled at 40.9% ABV, that's barely above legal strength. No word on exactly how many 750 ml bottles are available in the U.S., but the price is $25,000 each. Also in Scotland, Kingsbarns Distillery near St. Andrews is releasing its first aged spirit. It's a 2-year-old spirit drink that's still a year away from legally being called whiskey and was matured in 2 first-fill ex-bourbon barrels. 1,800 200 ml bottles will be available exclusively at the distillery's Visitors Center. Plans are still on track to release the first Kingsbarns single malt this time next year. 40 Creek has unveiled its annual limited edition bottling. 40 Creek Heritage blends separately distilled corn, rye, and barley whiskeys, then finishes the blend in toasted American oak casks. As always, it'll go on sale during the distillery's Whiskey Weekend at the end of September, but 40 Creek is taking reservations for specific bottle numbers now at the distillery's website. 16,500 bottles will be available in the U.S. and Canada, but reserved bottles have to be picked up at the distillery in Grimsby, Ontario. The price tag, $75 Canadian. I mentioned a couple of special Canada Day commemorative whiskies last time around for Canada's 150th anniversary. Crown Royal has also released a commemorative bottling of its Crown Royal Limited Edition, which is sold only in Canada. The whiskey and the bottle are the same, but there's a special white and red Canada 150 bag and 4 different boxes featuring scenes from major Canadian cities. And Michigan's Journeyman Distillery has released a New Zealand whiskey. Huh? Well, the distillery has an Around the World series where it imports different spirits for sale at the distillery. The 16-year-old New Zealand Doublewood whiskey uses a blend of 70% single malt and 30% grain whiskey from the old Willowbank Distillery in Dunedin, New Zealand. Journeyman has had a relationship with the New Zealand Whisky Company for several years now. That company owns most of Willowbank's remaining cask inventory. This whiskey was matured for 6 years in ex-bourbon barrels and 10 years in French oak New Zealand wine barrels. 2,000 bottles are available at the distillery. No word on pricing. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by Highland Park, the Orkney single malt with Viking soul, and a brand new website. Check it out today at HighlandParkWhiskey.com.
You don't need a special occasion to open a bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label. But when you have a special occasion, why not celebrate with a specially engraved bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label? Here's how one whiskey lover celebrated his team's recent success. He arranged to have 108 specially engraved bottles of Johnnie Walker Blue Label made for his co-workers. You might say he hit a home run. Just like a perfectly executed double play, Johnnie Walker Blue Label is smooth and well-rounded, and unlike a trophy, never needs polishing. Support for WhiskyCast comes from Johnnie Walker. Visit johnniewalker.com to find out more about engraving options near you.
Johnnie Walker Blue Label Blended Scotch Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Just a reminder that if you're in the Houston area, I'll be leading a whiskey tasting at Reserve 101 in Houston on July 25th. Tickets are still available. They're $20 each, and 100% of the proceeds will go to the Rescued Pets movement. You can get more details at reserve101.com, and there's a link on the calendar of events page at whiskycast.com. Let's open up the inbox now for this week's Your Voice, and we get to welcome a new brand partner this week to WhiskyCast. Lot 40 100% pot still rye whiskey joins us as the new sponsor for Your Voice each week. It's kind of appropriate since it's a big weekend in Canada with the 150th anniversary and all. We are very glad to have Lot 40 on board, and we're grateful for the support of all of our sponsors and brand partners. On that note, we'd also like to acknowledge that both Redbreast and Johnnie Walker have now signed on to continue as our presenting sponsors each week. Without our brand partners, it would not be possible to bring you WhiskyCast each week. And we had some great comments on social media after we acknowledged our new and returning sponsors over the last couple of days. Just a few of those comments. Charles Brown at Windy Boar on Twitter tweeted this from Arizona. I have a bottle of 12-year-old Redbreast and Johnnie Walker Double Black in my spirits cabinet, in no small part because they sponsor your excellent podcast. And he posted a photo to prove it. John Wendell at Fields00 on Twitter added this: Redbreast makes some fine ads, always effective at making me want to pour. Axis of Whiskey on Twitter had this comment on our new partnership with Lot 40, a sponsor to be proud of, especially today. I'm overdue to stock back up on it. Cheers. And Scotchology1 on Twitter sent along these comments. Just featured this, Lot 40, in an all-Canadian tasting earlier this month. It was a big hit. Hashtag Canada 150. And glad you're getting international sponsorship. WhiskyCast is a gift to the world. After all, good journalism is worth supporting. Hashtag cheers. Thanks, everyone. And once again, we are very grateful for the support we receive from our brand partners, including their support for our free and independent reporting on the whiskey industry. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we reported on Buffalo Trace's patent application for a sour mash distilling process said to have been developed by Colonel E.H. Taylor back when he owned what was then known as the OFC Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky. That story credited Dr. James Crow with developing the sour mash distilling process in 1823 at Oscar Pepper's Distillery near Versailles, which we know today as Woodford Reserve. Chris Middleton, who's done a lot of historical research into bourbon's early days, took issue with that and sent along this note. While he did significantly advance the science behind this methodology during the 1830s and 1840s, by managing bacteria to optimize fermentation and to effect a consistent flavor profile, he was not the inventor. nor was he working at the Elijah Pepper's Glens Creek Distillery in 1823. It was most likely a decade later he was employed as a distiller, after Oscar Pepper became the owner. Now, Chris also provided documentation showing that rum distillers in the West Indies had been using sour mash-style fermentation in the late 1600s, though there it was referred to as yeast backing. And the documentation that was used to get Woodford Reserve's site status as a National Historic Landmark indicates that James Crowe did not start working there until at least 1833, after Oscar Pepper took over the distillery following his father Elijah's death 2 years earlier. And just for the record, the Filson Historical Society's archives in Louisville credit Catherine Carpenter as the first documented user of the sour mash method at her family's distillery in Casey County, Kentucky, back in 1818. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always post it on the Your Voice page at WhiskyCast.com. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr at WhiskyCast. And my email address is comments@whiskycast.com. This week's Your Voice is brought to you by Lot 40, Canada's award-winning 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Time now for the calendar of events. The Proof Washington Distillers Festival is this coming Saturday, July 8th in Seattle. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society's U.S. chapter has a Midsummer Night's Dram tasting at the New York Distilling Company in Brooklyn on July 10th. The Whiskey Exchange in London has an evening with Teeling Whiskey on the 19th. The National Whiskey Festival is July 22nd in Edinburgh, Scotland, along with the West Coast Whiskey Phage in Oban. The Only Whiskey Show is July 27th and 28th in Sandton, South Africa, and Whiskey Freedom 2017 is July 29th in Perth, Australia, followed by Tasmanian Whiskey Week August 4th through the 13th. Right now, we have 135 different events on the searchable calendar at WhiskyCast.com, and we're adding new events all the time. If you have a festival or a tasting coming up, just use the contact form on our website and let us know about it.
Redbreast fans have always cherished our whiskey's sherry notes, so we set out to embellish that character. Introducing the Redbreast Listowel edition, a quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey finished in first fill Oloroso sherry casks from Spain's prestigious Bodegas Listowel. Carrying Redbreast's trademark pot still spices and dark dried fruit notes, the Listowel edition is graced with an enduring sherry finish that would be better described as a final act. Discover the newest branch on the Redbreast family tree.
Redbreast Listowel is now the latest award-winning member of the Redbreast family. It is Whiskey Advocate's 2016 Irish Whiskey of the Year. Try a bottle for yourself.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin. Here's a question for you. How many Glencairn glasses do you own? Go ahead and count. I'll wait. Okay, no need to count. But if you're like me, you probably have a few dozen of them with logos for various distilleries and festivals. And a few of you might even have one with our WhiskyCast logo on it. A few years ago, you might go into a bar and get a puzzled look for ordering a dram in a Glencairn glass. But more whiskey bars are making Glencairns their standard glass as well. Glencairn Crystal founder Raymond Davidson came up with the basic design for the glass years ago as a tool for whiskey blenders. He and his sons started selling them in 2001, and last year they sold more than 3 million glasses. That's up 22% over 2015. Scott Davidson is now Glencairn's managing director. Another big year of sales for you guys, and it just seems to keep growing year on year as these glasses become really iconic around the world in terms of whiskey lovers, right?
Well, that's true, yeah. I mean, we're really pleased that we've had this amount of adoption of the glasses, this much support, and people buying into it all around the world. It's been quite transformational for us as a company that we work, traditionally just works behind the scenes providing and creating glasses and decanters and lots of, nice merchandise for the whiskey industry. generally, but to have a glass that's become iconic and associated with our little company in Scotland that has got this sort of following and reputation, and it's been used all over the place. It's quite fantastic. We're really pleased. Really pleased. We could say that it's very much reflecting in the growth of malt whisky around the world as well. I mean, that's probably the biggest driver, and we hope that the Glencairn glass is a little tool that is making it all, or lubricating it all, if that makes sense.
Well, it really was the perfect timing for you guys to come out with this in 2001 because you got established just as whiskey was starting to take off in the late 2005 to 2010 period.
That's right. I mean, it was like we didn't expect it to be what it is. We expected it to be a great tool that would help the industry and show off our capabilities to the whiskey industry. Because we've always been brought up all around the whiskey industry. So, as a glass company, trying to do something to help your closest business sector, that was all the word we were really looking for at the time. To find it taking off and malt whisky just rocketing from that time, 2000, when the Whisky Lives and the Whisky Fest were just getting going around the world, to be there at the beginning and then watch malt whisky just take off, it's been quite a journey, it really has.
How did you guys make the transition from just being the industry tool for the blenders to actually becoming a consumer product?
For us, it wasn't by design. We didn't push it that way. Our main focus was making sure that the whiskey companies all helped us support it and get it used to help them promote whiskey better. There seemed to be some flip, and we're still trying to look into it to this day as to what happened and how, so many go through Amazon and all these other channels that we didn't even know were interested. That's been a big surprise for us, if I'll be honest, and we're delighted that the consumers have picked up on it and said, probably going around the whiskey shows and saying, how do I get more of these glasses after they've been at a whiskey show or a conference, or speaking to friends who have collected glasses, and then this whole adoption, it's just been surprising for us. We're so delighted.
How do you guys manage to make 3 million glasses a year?
Once again, it's a lot of planning, a lot of organisation, the partners who help us really schedule getting this many glasses produced and supplied and getting them decorated here. It's crackerjack timing sometimes, but we work really hard to get them around. And to be fair, even doing the 3 million or so glasses we do a year, it's still into a very niche market. The potential of malt whiskey and all the channels and all the routes to market. There's so many now. We think there's still more great potential to be there, to get into more bars and do more educating. I always describe the glass now as a little brand ambassador for whiskey, and that's how it should be, as a tool to help the industry promote more whiskey. So hopefully that adoption will keep happening.
And all the glasses are still made in Scotland, right?
Well, that's, we say
as many as you can, right?
Yeah. The problem is that in order to make, unfortunately in the UK and like most industries, the glass industry is almost gone. What you've got is a contraction that's happened in the crystal and glass industry for the last 30 plus years, and the manufacturers that are left are the same manufacturers that have been supplying the Waterfords and all the other major manufacturers of brands in the world. And we've got one key partner that specialises in helping us making our glass, because the Glencairn glass is such it has to compete in so many different levels as a product for being used for the whiskey companies to promote in packs and promotional activity, right down to being retailed as well. So it's fair to say that it's a shame to say that the major manufacturing in the UK or in Ireland is gone now, much like most of the major manufacturing in Europe as well, because the demand for crystal has in the premium glass has really disappeared. It's been in contrast to the whiskey industry, in contrast to maybe bottle makers and the bottle industry making the millions and millions of bottles for wine or for whiskey or anything else. In contrast, the glass industry has been under great pressure, and and right now it's still contracting. So things that we're doing in specialist glasses are a real driver for the future.
Could you, at some point, actually bring manufacturing of the glasses back to Scotland if you had to?
I'd love to. I would really love to. It'd be a great opportunity if we could, because it's we always, when we created the Glencairn glass, we knew about all of these limitations, and what we said at the time, Mark, was that we'll do everything we can to keep the product as Scottish as it possibly can be, and from the design, the creation, everything around it, it had to be done here in Scotland, and everything was done, and even to the point of getting it out there, everything's been done here because it had to be. It's a shame that we can't do more, but the investment is to manufacture is tens of millions to set it up to run one type of product. A lot of people don't realise that we've got a few different types of partners we've used since my dad founded the business for our decanters and our premium glassware that we have. These guys, the most excellent factories in Europe, and they've been our partners for 35 plus years. And we supported them as much as they supported us in making sure that we can have the variety of products that we offer, because the Glencairn glass, as an example, is a fine crystal glass, but it's produced in volume, as you can imagine. If you look at our handmade decanters that are produced in hundreds, it's a totally different manufacturing process, all hand blown and whatnot, and we've got various tiers of product that we have to, in order to meet the demands of the whiskey companies, we've got to offer various different manufacturing standards, and if we had to facilitate that all in Scotland, we'd need to have a site that was millions of square feet just to produce the different grades of crystal, the different grades of glass that we do. Does that give you understanding?
Sure. Are you worried about knockoffs at all? Because I see knockoff Glencairns occasionally showing up.
Oh yeah. We find that's an ongoing issue. You say it's a sign of success if you've got copies out there, and it's frustrating sometimes when you see them. But it's been going on since, almost we launched the glass. Not long after, within 5 years, there were people trying to do coffees and whatnot, and a lot of them from the Far Eastern markets and whatnot, just because they deemed them they could be competing in the market and offer something. So it has been a bit of a challenge. It's part of the reason why we've, for all the glasses and all the success we've had, we pile a lot into building up our brand and building on the reputation and building on the provenance of the product, etc., to try and keep people aware that they're buying into, a recognised item that's part of the industry for the industry's success. So to buy the copy glasses is just diminishing it. It's the hardest thing to control, because we want the industry to be successful on the back of the glass, and we want to keep pushing it as far as we can with all the associations we do and all the events we work with and cooperate with, to try and make sure that the people understand that you've got all these great bottles of whiskey. It's really important to have a good product to consume it in as well. And the Glencairn glass seems to fit the bill for all of that. So we're really hopeful that will that will be supported by everybody, and hopefully the knockoffs and coffees will diminish over time. We don't think so.
How worried are you guys about Brexit, given that more than half of your sales are now coming from outside the UK?
Personally, we've talked about it, we're not worried at all. We see great opportunities all around the world, and I think it's one of the great things that a lot of people don't realize. When Europe was created, it was because there was a need to fix a lot of the problems in trade at the time. But now there's so few barriers to doing trade all over the world. The old terms of doing business in Europe, it is just as easy to do that business in China as in Europe now. Yeah, there's still tariffs here and there, but by and large, there's just so much opportunity if you go around the world, and there's so much recognition of that now. I think it's actually probably a shame that Europe hasn't modernized enough that has caused Brexit in the first instance.
Realistically, how much faster can you grow this business over the next 10 years?
Gosh knows. I'm compared to my brothers and my father, I'm always seen as the most optimistic of the family. But we really believe, the business can grow a couple of times anyway. We try to hold ourselves back because we want steady. We're a family business. We've got really strong family values. We believe in all our employees passionately and supporting them. And we try. My brother Paul's ethos is job for life in our business, and we are really careful how we employ because we want the business for the long term, and supporting that type of philosophy. And we've built it up now, Mark, to have now over 60 people, all doing specialist roles in the business, from product development to, we've got a team of 15 who all we do is sandblast, crystal and glass. It's quite fantastic. And then we've got another team that assembles metal onto decanters, things that we couldn't have dreamed of 10 years ago. So we think there's a great future for us if we keep doing the right things and be sensible. I mean, we want to reflect ourselves like the drinks industry itself. Be ambitious but conservative with it. We're not going to risk it all on a whim because there's so much we've got to do right and look after all the people that are here.
Now, you've been asked to put a lot of designs on whiskey glasses and a lot of logos for various festivals and distilleries and whiskey clubs and all that.
Yeah.
What would you not put on a Glencairn glass? What have you turned down and said, no, we're not going to do that one?
My main role now, Mark, is in charge of all the product development of all the new products we do and all the crazy ideas that come to us. There's been very little that we've said no to, and if anything, our biggest problem is we tend to say, do you know what? We'll give it a crack. We'll have a go at it and see what we can do. And so far, touch wood, it's gone okay. We've been, sometimes in getting a complex design on the glass, it's a challenge, but we like to have a go at it. We've got a great team of designers in here, all interested in doing and pushing the boundaries. Sometimes it frustrates us somewhat, and we give ourselves a rod for our back, but yeah, it goes great. We love it.
How did your dad come up with the design for these glasses? Because it's unlike anything we'd seen before with copitas, snifters, other types of glasses. How did your dad come up with the design?
Now then, that's a tricky story because there's a few ways of coming at it. My dad was at Glasgow, wanted to go to art school, but he wasn't able to go. So he ended up getting he had to take a job and do his apprenticeship in Honeywell, did electronics and all the rest of it. But he always wanted to get back, and I think that influenced how he wanted to do something, because he always drunk Johnny Walker Black. That was his favourite tipple at the time, but he never got it served correctly. So whenever he'd go into a bar, he'd say, well, can I get it in a wine glass, Paris goblet or something, because at least he'll appreciate it more. And when the opportunity came for him, when he was in his own business and whatnot, he said, I want to address this problem. And Crystal Company said, I'll go ahead and do it. And he went ahead and got a concept done, and then promptly forgot about it because he didn't know enough people in the industry and channels of how to take it to market. So he did what everybody who creates a good idea, he put it in his shelf and forgot about it until one day Paul found it and asked about it. And my dad told him the whole story, and Paul put it in his pocket and took it up. And I think the first person he saw was Richard Patterson, and then it just snowballed from there about saying, it would be great to have a glass for the industry. And that was the most challenging thing, getting everybody involved in it.
Wait a second. Patterson?
Patterson.
Because every time anybody goes to a tasting with Patterson, he's always bragging on and on about Copita glasses with the stem.
Oh, he was one of our great supporters of it, and still is. But then again, it's like he uses the Copita, and you see the Copita that we did for the labs that he uses. We designed that for him and all the other guys in the drinks industry. So it's one of those things. See, if you're doing lots, in the lab, you're doing lots of comparative nosing. You want to zoom through so many products. That's the one. But see, when it comes to social drinking, bit of nosing, bit of appreciation, and a more casual environment, Glencairn Glass wins in all because it covers off all of it in an easy to do manner.
I had to bust on Patterson a little bit there, just because I've seen him talk about Copitas so often.
Really? Oh, he likes talking. That's his thing.
So your brother Paul sees this, and he takes it to Patterson.
And then over to all others, yeah. Yeah, it just snowballs from there. And people, we took a view that chatting to master blenders and getting the master blenders' view on how it should be, because they took my dad's concept and we evolved it to be the Glencairn glass. But the key difference in how we made it sticky was saying, you know what, if we'd taken this to a marketing department, they'd have said, oh, you can't, we'll take it exclusively, or no, it doesn't fit with our brand, and all the rest of it. And that's the normal channels. We were in a nice position where we could talk to master blenders and say, if we were thinking about the consumers, how would we create a glass that would benefit the consumers and make them appreciate all the craft that all the time that you put into your whiskies? How do we get that message across to them easily in a relaxed environment and make it easy for them to have and hold and consume your favourite spirits? That was the driving factor, and that's what made it successful. And when we launched it, the whole point was it wasn't just for one whiskey company to benefit from, it was for all the whiskey companies to benefit from, the little ones, the big ones, and hopefully, and everybody buys into the concept that we're here to educate the category, not just aid one brand, so to speak, or one business. It was there for the whole industry to get the benefit of, and that's what we hope we've done well, and to see it then evolve through all the bourbons and through all the craft industry, and all, Cavalan in Taiwan use it, and all Indian root and everybody use it, and throughout Australia and New Zealand, all these, everybody's using it, and that's the success because it becomes a talking point. It says, oh gosh, if you're drinking from that, you appreciate your whiskies, and that was a great thing, and hopefully that will keep driving the growth and the appreciation of whiskey as a category, because that couldn't give us any more satisfaction than to know that we've helped the industry, much as a glass company can.
Scott alluded to the other part of Glencairn's business. It also produces custom crystal decanters and packaging for high-end whiskeys and other spirits. And for the first time in the company's history, it's doing more business outside the UK than it is inside the UK. That's this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Lagavulin, where patience has been awarded. Lagavulin 25 is Whiskey Advocate's Isla Single Malt of the Year. This 25-year-old whiskey, matured exclusively in sherry casks, is a recognition of the distillers that have crafted Lagavulin across the years. Learn more at malts.com. Now, before we get to this week's tasting notes, it's time to announce the winner of our latest giveaway. I received a copy of Davin de Kergamo's excellent book, Canadian Whiskey, the Portable Expert, this past week while visiting the Crown Royal Distillery in Manitoba. I already have a couple of copies of Davin's book on my shelf, so I decided to have Davin sign this one and give it to a WhiskyCast listener. As I've mentioned before, Saturday was Canada Day and the country's 150th anniversary, so I thought it would be fun to have a Twitter contest. Thanks to everyone who liked and retweeted my tweets with a photo of Davin's book to enter. Our winner is Sherry Wong of Charleston, West Virginia. Congratulations, Sherry. I'll be sending your book out this week. And by the way, Davin has just finished work on the new edition of Canadian Whiskey, the Portable Expert. It's scheduled to be published this October. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. Let's start off this week with the Balvenie's Ton 1509, batch number 3. It's another one of Maltmaster David Stewart's special creations. This one is bottled at 52.2% ABV. The nose is aromatic with notes of dried fruits, a nice maltiness, a touch of oak, sandalwood, and honey. The taste has a great balance of tree fruits and spicy notes of cinnamon, allspice, and just a bit of ginger in the background. The spices last well into the finish, but gradually fade to leave behind hints of dried fruits and honey. I'm scoring the Balvenie's Ton 1509, batch number 3, a 93. Let's stick with the number 3. In this case, Luxco's Blood Oath Pact number 3 bourbon. It's finished in Cabernet Sauvignon wine casks and bottled at 49.3% ABV. The nose has notes of caramel, vanilla, gentle spices, a hint of red grapes, honey, and dark chocolate. The taste is complex and spicy with black pepper, chili powder, orange peel, caramel candy, vanilla, honey, red grapes, and just a hint of molasses. The finish is long with subtle spices and a nice touch of dried fruits. I'm scoring Luxco's Blood Oath Pact number 3 bourbon a 92. More tasting notes in a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. Family-owned and operated since 1935, Heaven Hill remains fiercely independent and committed to the traditions and history of American whiskey, with an award-winning range including Evan Williams and Elijah Craig bourbons, and Rittenhouse and Pikesville ryes. Meet the whole family at heavenhilldistillery.com. Now let's look at a couple of single cask bottlings from Kavalan in Taiwan. First up, the Amontillado Sherry single cask bottling that is part of the first tranche of Kavalan single casks exported to the U.S. This one is bottled at 57.8% ABV. The nose has a great sherry aroma with dried fruits, figs, toffee, allspice, dark honey, and oak. The taste is fruity and spicy, with cinnamon and white pepper balanced out nicely by figs, plums, raisins, and toffee notes, with just a hint of honey in the background. The finish is dry and long, with subtle dried fruits, toffee, and just a hint of spices. I'm scoring the Kavalan Amontillado single cask a 93. Last time around, I mentioned the Kavalan Peaty single cask that's exclusive to the Whiskey Exchange in London. This one was distilled back in 2007 and matured in a cask previously used for a peated Isla single malt. It's bottled at 52.4% ABV. The nose has a subtle smokiness along with black tea and honey, fudge, toffee, and vanilla notes. The taste starts off dry and just a bit ashy. Then the spices come alive with cinnamon and black pepper, complemented by tart red apples, baked oranges, and hints of lemon zest and oak. The finish has lingering spices, lemon zest, vanilla, and oak notes. Overall, it's a very well-balanced single malt where the peaty influence does not overpower the distillery's character. I'm scoring the Cavalan PD Single Cask a 93. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. And I'm adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of 1,900 different whiskeys at WhiskyCast.com. That's also where you'll find links for WhiskyCast HD and WhiskyCast virtual tastings episodes, the latest whiskey news, events, and much more, including a complete archive of past episodes. Let's keep the cask strength conversation going all week long. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr at WhiskyCast, and my email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
You don't need a special occasion to celebrate with something truly unique, but a personally engraved bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label can make any occasion special. Support for WhiskyCast comes from Johnnie Walker. Visit johnniewalker.com to find out more about engraving options near you.
WhiskyCast. Brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2017, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.